William Shakespeare was born on April 23rd, 1564, in Stratford-upon-Avon. This is a city in England around 100 miles from London. He was born the child of John Shakespeare and Mary Arden. This was the couple's third pregnancy. However, their first two children died as a result of the Black Death in England. They went on to have four more children after the birth of William, including Joan, Gilbert, Bard, Anne, and Richard. It is noted that John Shakespeare was the chief alderman in Stratford, a very prestigious honor at the time, even though he was more than likely illiterate.
William Shakespeare attended King Edward VI Grammar School, where he learned Latin, Greek, and studied Roman dramatists. However, family struggles brought his time at the well-acclaimed school to an end. John Shakespeare was in some serious financial trouble surrounding issues with his taxes. Shortly after that was discovered, one of the Shakespeare siblings, Anne, passed away. Later, John was forced to mortgage yet another property, only deepening the family's financial issues.
William married up in the world, making Anne Hathaway his wife when he was 18, even though she was likely 7 or 8 years older than him. Together they had 3 kids, Suzanne, Judith, and Hamnet, who died at a young age. It is highly possible around 1585, William went to London to be an acting apprentice. However, the plague caused many closures of theaters in London, leading to William Shakespeare's first forte, poetry.
In 1594, Shakespeare was finally able to join Lord Chamberlain's Men, a popular acting company. He was also a member of the King's Men that would perform at the infamous Globe Theatre. Shakespeare also owned a share in this theatre. Unfortunately, there was a massive fire at the Globe Theatre, forcing it out of commission. Luckily, it was able to be rebuilt.
It is said that if you look for the enduring fame of William Shakespeare, you will be led to his poetry. Between 1593 and 1601, Shakespeare composed the Sonnets of Shakespeare, published in 1609. These are known to portray the decay of time and the persistence of love and beauty. Only around half of Shakespeare's plays were ever published in quarto editions in his lifetime.
In his lifetime, William Shakespeare was said to have written 38 plays, his famous Shakespearean sonnets, and 5 other major poems. He is still considered one of the most widely read authors ever. The life and works of Shakespeare is second to only the Bible in English-speaking countries. William Shakespeare died on his birthday, April 23rd in 1616. He is still buried today in Stratford's Holy Trinity Church.
The first recorded performance of William Shakespeare's tragedy, King Lear, was on December 26, 1606. It is believed that King Lear was first printed in 1608. This is very hard to establish due to the fact that Shakespeare's works were not published until 1623, when 2 fellow actors, John Hemmings and Henry Condell, recorded his works.
King Lear begins with the main character, King Lear himself, discussing how he will divide his land between his 3 daughters, Goneril, Regan, and Cordelia. Since the recent passing of his wife and queen, Lear has come to realize that he is not getting any younger.
Exactly. Because of this, Lear has his 3 daughters profess their love to him. And based on the amount of love that they profess, they'll be given that amount of land.
I know, sounds crazy, but it gets even worse. Lear knew the whole time that each daughter would get an equal parcel of land. He was just fiending for some affection.
Both Goneril and Regan, the oldest 2 sisters, fulfill their father's wishes. They both profess their infinite and powerful love for him and in turn please him greatly. However, Cordelia, the golden youngest daughter, doesn't quite live up to his expectations.
By being truthfully honest about her love for her father, Cordelia finds herself banished from Lear's kingdom. Instead of playing the same game as her evil sisters, she responds with nothing. Although she does state that she loves her father, she refuses to state that she loves him more than any other man, saving this love for a future husband.
Impressed by Cordelia's honesty, the King of France decides to take her away as his bride. Despite having no land or power to give him, the King of France makes Cordelia his queen.
Cordelia leaves behind 2 scheming sisters who are ready to grab hold of their father's power. And believe us when we say they will do just about anything.
Next, we're introduced to 2 new characters, Edmund and Edgar. Confusing, we know. They are both sons of a man named Did we ever decide how his name is pronounced?
Gloucester. For purposes of this video, it'll be Gloucester.
Read it as you will, but we're going to call him Gloucester. Gloucester, one of King Lear's closest confidants. Edmund is often referred to as the bastard son, a product of a premarital affair.
Edmund is extremely bitter about this title and the stigmas that constantly follow him around. Because of this, he resents his legitimate half-brother Edgar and plans to put his own father against him. He deviously writes a letter talking about the murder of Gloucester and says it was written by Edgar.
Edmund then deepens the plot by telling Edgar to stay as far away from Gloucester as possible because he's angry with him. Once Gloucester discovers the letter, Edmund has become the good son and a step closer to the power he so desperately desires.
Following the discovery of Edmund's vicious plot, we find Lear residing at Goneril's castle. In an effort to diminish her father's power, Goneril has told him that he may only keep 50 of the 100 knights that he has staying with him at Goneril's castle.
Regan, is she the middle sister?
Middle, yeah.
The middle sister. Regan, the middle sister, then continues her sister's attempts when she tells Lear that in order to stay at her castle, Lear can only have half of his original amount. So he only has 25 knights. So the number gets whittled down to 0. Goneril and Regan are definitely trying to belittle their father here.
Those little...
Whoa, Morgan. Let's not say something we're going to regret here. I'd like an A on this project.
Yeah, sorry dude, my bad.
The start of Act 2 brings us back to the Edmund versus Edgar battle. Edmund tells Edgar that he must flee immediately, and in order to make his story more believable, he tells Edgar that his father, Gloucester, is looking for him and is very angry.
And just when you thought it couldn't get any juicier, Edmund pulls out his sword and cuts himself in the arm when he hears Gloucester coming. He tells his father that Edgar had given him this wound and harmed him during a fight about Edgar's so-called plans to kill Gloucester.
Furious, Gloucester sends men out to find Edgar and confirms his stance with his illegitimate son, thanking him for uncovering this plot.
Edgar leaves and decides to become a homeless beggar. From this point on, he will be referred to as Poor Tom. Shakespeare plays with the idea of double identity here, as he does with a few other minor characters throughout the play.
Next, King Lear arrives at Gloucester's castle along with Goneril and Regan. Lear expresses his concerns that his daughter's rules about his knights. Instead of being sympathetic, Goneril and Regan stand firm in their ways, not allowing their father to have any more power than they deem necessary.
In a wild fit of anger, Lear storms out of Gloucester's castle and into the beginnings of a brutal storm. In response, Goneril and Regan order the doors of the castle to be shut and to let their old senile father fend for himself.
I hate these women.
You and me both.
Okay, now before we begin with Act 3, we gotta warn you, it gets a little crazy.
And when we say crazy, we mean like your mom at a family member's wedding when the 80s music starts to play.
No, that's not what we mean at all. But I guess I understand what you're getting at.
Geez, sorry. My mom's just a freak.
Anyway, here we meet the Fool. No one really knows if the Fool was an actual character or just some figment of Lear's imagination, but whatever Shakespeare intended him to be, the Fool plays a very important role starting in this act.
The Fool attempts to convince Lear to ask his daughter's forgiveness, stating that the storm has no pity for wise men or for fools. After this, a man named Kent takes Lear to his hut, where he can rest while the Fool shares his most famous lines in the play. The Fool's Prophecy. Shall I read?
Morgan, shut up. No one really cares or understands what the prophecy really means.
Well then, let's talk about something more entertaining, like Edmund's betrayal of his father.
Wait, I thought he was betraying Edgar.
This guy Edmund is a real slimeball, Autumn. I guess his quest for power wasn't over after Edgar.
I think I know what kind of guy you're talking about, Morgan. Sounds like a classic Sauk Rapids guy to me.
I hate ourselves.
I hate us too.
Oh man. Gloucester expresses his concern about the treatment of Lear by his daughters. With this in mind, he leaves his castle in search for his friend. But he knows this may get him in trouble with Regan's husband, Cornwall, so he asks Edmund to keep this a secret.
I think I can guess what happens next. Edmund tells Cornwall about Gloucester's quest for Lear.
Exactly. With his father being accused of treachery, Edmund is the sole heir to his father's land, fortune, and power.
Yikes! At this point in the story, Lear is stuck outside in a raging storm. Upon reaching Kent's hut, Lear begins to reflect on his reign as king. Being present during this storm has made him regret treatment of poor and misfortuned.
Just as Lear was pondering these facts, he gets introduced to poor Tom, aka Edgar. In response to poor Tom's nakedness, Lear strips down in an effort to further sympathize with this man whom he'd already asked if he too had suffered from madness.
Oh, yuck! If this Lear guy is really as old as you're saying he is, he's probably the last guy I'd want to see naked.
Who'd be the first?
Come on, Morgan. Not the time or place for this discussion. We'll talk about it later.
Okay, good, because we're coming up on one of my favorite parts, Lear's trial for his daughters. Lear finally snaps this act and decides he needs to put his daughters on trial, without them even being there?
Oh, this part's really good. I really think we should act it out.
Me too.
Frateretto calls me and tells me Nero is an angler in the lake of darkness. Pray, innocent, and beware the foul find.
Prithee, nuncle, tell me whether a madman be a gentleman or a yeoman.
A king! A king!
No, he's a yeoman that has been a gentleman to his son, for he's a mad yeoman that sees his son a gentleman before him.
To have 1,000 with red burning spits come hissing in upon him.
The foul find bites my back.
He's mad that trusts in the tameness of a wolf, a horse's health, a boy's love, or a whore's oath.
It shall be done, I will arraign them straight. Come, sit thou here. Most learned justicer, thou sapient sir, sit here. Now she foxes.
Look where he stands and glares. Want thou eyes at trial, madame? Come o'er the bourne, Bessie, to me.
Her boat hath a leak, and she must not speak. Why does she not come over to thee?
The foul find haunts poor Tom in the voice of a nightingale. Hop a dance, cries in Tom's Betty for 2 white herring. Croak not, black angel, I have no food for thee.
How do you, sir? Stand you not so amazed. Will you lie down and rest upon the cushions?
I'll see their trial first. Bring in the evidence. Thou robbed man of justice, take thy place. And now his yellow folk of equity bench by his side. You, oath commission, sit you too.
Let us deal justly. Sleepest or wakest, thou jolly shepherd? Thy sheep be in the corn, and for one blast of thy minikin mouth, thy sheep shall take no harm. Purr, the cat is gray.
Arraign her first. 'Tis Goneril. I here take my oath before this honorable assembly. She kicked the poor king, her father.
Come hither, mistress. Is your name Goneril?
She cannot deny it.
Cry you mercy. I took you for a joint stool.
And here's another, whose warped looks proclaim, and her store her heart is made on. Stop her there. Arms, arms, sword, fire, corruption in the place. False justicer, why hast thou let her escape?
Bless thy 5 wits.
Oh, pity. Sir, where is the patience now, that thou so oft have boasted to retain?
My tears begin to take his part so much, they'll mar my counterfeiting.
The little dogs and all, Tray, Blanche, and Sweetheart, see they bark at me.
Tom will throw his head at them. Avaunt you curs, tooth that poisons if it bite. Mastiff, greyhound, mongrel, grim. Hound or spaniel, brock or hem, bobtail, tyke, or trundle tail. Tom will make them weep and wail. For with throwing thus my head, dogs leap the hatch, and all are fled. Be thy mouth or black or white, duty, deedy, cesses. Come march to wakes and fairs and market towns. Poor Tom, thy horn is dry.
Then let them autonomize Regan. She what breeds about her heart. Is there any cause in nature that makes these hard hearts? You, sir, I entertain you for one of my 100. Only I do not like the fashion of your garments. You will say they are the Persian attire, but let them be changed.
Now, good my lord, lie here and rest a while.
Make no noise, make no noise. Draw the curtains, so. We'll go to supper in the morning, so.
And I'll go to bed at noon. Lear is pretty nuts if you ask me.
I agree, but as we promised, Act 3 does get pretty crazy. We must deliver.
True. And you know what's nuts is this. Regan's servants find Gloucester after he helped Lear escape his daughter's wrath by sending him to Dover. Once Gloucester is brought to Regan in Cornwall, they deliver a horribly cruel punishment.
You bet they did. Cornwall literally gouges out Gloucester's eyes, and that is nasty.
True, and it gets even crazier. One of Gloucester's servants steps forward to fight Cornwall for harming Gloucester. Even though the servant only wounds Cornwall, Regan steps in and takes matters into her own hands, killing the servant. Couple goals, if you ask me.
Morgan, no! As if the situation wasn't already bad enough, Regan deepens the wound on Gloucester by revealing it was Edmund who had betrayed him, never Edgar. This reveals another common theme throughout the play: blindness versus sight.
Right. Like Lear discovering the sad truth about the beggar population after he became one, and Gloucester seeing the truth about Edmund and Edgar after he had been blinded.
From this point on, Gloucester is in the hands of a supportive beggar while the reign of Goneril and Regan starts to spiral out of control.
Beginning of this act, Gloucester is quite literally led to his legitimate son, Edgar, in Dover.
Morgan, did you just make a blind guy pun about a guy who literally just has had his eyes yanked from his head?
No?
Wow, the nerve of some people.
Well, as I was saying, once in Dover, Gloucester expresses his denial and regret revolving around the situation with Edmund. He states that he would rather have his son back, referring to Edgar, than his eyesight. He also requests that he be brought to the ledge of the highest cliff in Dover. Keep in mind that Edgar has yet to reveal himself as his son.
Speaking of Gloucester's sons, just wait till you hear what's happening back at Goneril's castle. Goneril's husband, Albany, has always been sympathetic towards Lear, a better guy than most in this play, if you ask me. Because of this, Goneril gets quite upset with him and decides she'd be better fitting with Edmund, the illegitimate son.
Just when I thought I couldn't dislike her any more than I already do.
I know! So Albany decides to side with Gloucester while Goneril plots her adultery against him, as well as to wage war against the French army. Keep in mind that Cordelia is the Queen of France right now, so she's essentially waging war against her own sister, who's coming to avenge Lear's power. She requests that Cornwall's army be raised immediately.
Little did she know that Cornwall had just recently died from the wounds he suffered after gouging out Gloucester's eyes. Since her husband just died, Regan decides that she has the right to have Edmund. If you aren't picking up what I'm putting down, this is not going to end well for anyone.
You know what else isn't going to end well, Morgan? Gloucester's attempted suicide. He asked Edgar, his own son, to lead him to the highest cliff in Dover so he could jump off of it. Rather than doing that, Edgar leads him to a measly couple-foot drop. And once he wakes up, Edgar tells him that he survived for a reason.
That's actually kind of comical. He literally fell 3 feet.
Okay, I guess, but seriousness here, Morgan.
However, what happens next is not comical. Regan's servant, Oswald, has stumbled upon Edgar and Gloucester in Dover. Oswald has been given orders from Regan to kill Gloucester at any chance he gets. But Edgar steps up to defend his father and kills Oswald.
Not only did he kill him, but he obtained letters that Oswald had been carrying containing details about the treacherous acts going on back home by his own brother against him. Edgar becomes angry at his brother and then swears he will show Albany when he gets the chance.
Now going back to the Cordelia character, the Queen of France. She has finally met up with her father again after the French army had found him and brought them to their camp. Even though Lear has kicked her out of his kingdom and trusted her evil sisters instead, Cordelia still unselfishly forgives him.
Whoa. It sounds like Lear got off a little bit too easy to me.
True, but we have to remember, at this point, Lear is so senile and so crazy that Cordelia not forgiving him could quite possibly put him on the brink of death.
Well, folks, here we are, the final act. For those of you watching, you might want to brace yourselves. There's a lot of death throughout this act.
At the beginning of this act, we see Edgar dressed as another peasant deliver Oswald's letters to Albany. Albany finally knows the truth about his wife, Goneril, and her intentions with Edmund. Despite all of this and his best intentions, Albany has decided to fight on the side of England in the war against France.
After this, we see Edmund standing all by himself, and he tells us, the readers, that he has just professed his love to the sisters, both Goneril and Regan. If you've seen Ben Higgins' season of The Bachelor, you know that professing your love to two different girls doesn't end up well for anyone.
The battle between France and England does not end well for Lear or Cordelia, as they end up captured and imprisoned. The end of the actual battle signifies the climax of the brewing feud between Goneril and Regan.
Regan has just announced that she intends to take Edmund as her husband. As you can imagine, Goneril isn't quite happy about this and verbally disagrees with her sister, who has to leave because she's feeling quite sick. And by sick, I mean that Goneril has literally just poisoned her sister so that the feud over Edmund can be over.
Albany is not okay with any of this and accuses Edmund of treason. Albany then calls on Edgar, who is still in disguise, to defeat Edmund in combat. Edgar gravely injures his illegitimate brother, and he will eventually die from the wounds that he suffered.
After this, Edgar finally reveals to the audience that he is himself. And he also reveals that he told Gloucester this, but he died after hearing the news.
The reception of Edgar back home is abruptly ended with the presentation of a bloody knife. This knife has been used by Goneril to kill herself in response to the death of her sister, whom she in fact poisoned herself.
In an effort to save face before he passed, Edmund tells Albany to rescind the orders for Lear and Cordelia's hangings. Unfortunately, this order comes a little bit too late. Lear enters holding a dead Cordelia in his arms, sickened with grief. Lear also dies after he thinks he finally sees Cordelia breathe again.
But wait, she wasn't actually breathing, right?
No, she was actually dead, but at this point Lear is so crazy and senile that he really is firmly believing that he saw her breathe.
Wow. So who even is still alive at the end of this act?
So at the end of this act we have, it looks like Albany, Edgar, and Kent. Kent being one of Lear's servants, for those of you who forgot. But Kent resents the power that he was re-awarded by Albany and leaves to end his own life. So really all we have is Albany and Edgar.
Wow. At least they're the good guys anyways. But we tried to warn you, King Lear is a horrible tragedy.
Definitely.
We know that we have thrown a lot at you in the last few minutes, and it may be very confusing to pick out exactly what is important and what is not. So here it is. What exactly is the big picture?
One of the major themes present throughout the play is deception. We see characters like Edgar, aka Poor Tom, play with this idea multiple times. He physically disguises himself to guard against the harms of his treacherous, illegitimate brother, Edmund. This idea is also presented with characters Goneril and Regan, who use their so-called love to deceive their father. By tricking their father into giving them his land, they are able to absolutely drive their father insane, shun their sister, and take over the kingdom.
Another common theme is misjudgment. Both Gloucester and King Lear falsely believed the wrong children. Gloucester was wronged by Edmund, who made it seem like it was the other son, Edgar, who was wanting to kill him. In all reality, it was Edmund who was trying to take his father's power. Lear also gave his land to his two daughters who were the most likely to abuse it, and not the daughter who was being most honest with him. This goes hand in hand with the theme blindness and sight. Gloucester was completely oblivious to his misjudgment when he still had his eyes, but once Cornwall had gouged them out, he discovered the truth about Edmund and Edgar.
On a much more positive note, another important concept is the idea of reconciliation. Even though Lear literally banished Cordelia for no logical reason and gave all of his land to his dubious daughters, Cordelia still chooses to forgive him. This is a true embodiment of unselfishly loving one another. It is Cordelia's true, honest love for her father that is able to bring her back to him at the end of the play. In a 2002 quote by David Walsh, Walsh says, "King Lear is among the most complex and contradictory of Shakespeare's works. While the play has no single character with the intellectual or sensual appeal of Hamlet, Flagstaff, Cleopatra, Richard III, or even Rosalind, it treats in the most vivid and dense language a vast array of problems. The tragedy's cumulative effect is deeply troubling and in its own fashion subversive."
In the end, I really did like King Lear. It had a lot of action and good scenes. I liked it better than either Romeo and Juliet or Macbeth.
In the end, I too like King Lear more than Romeo and Juliet, Macbeth, or even Hamlet. I thought the play challenged a lot of big social rules and took characters like Cordelia and Edmund and used them to challenge some distinct social rules that play into effect even today. I really enjoyed it.
Even though basically everybody died at the end of the play, I still choose to give the play 2 thumbs up.
Which is 2 more thumbs than Gloucester had eyes at the end of the show.
Okay, good job.